Welcome to all of you in today's lecture in database management system. Today we can start new point, that is SQL. We consider SQL as a structured query language. It is the new topic in this particular topic. Okay. Uh, in this lecture, we discuss the language, that is structured query language. What is the structured query language? The basic structure of that structured query language, and how this structured query language is useful in your database management system, and the corresponding different types of elements used in the structured query language. Okay. We consider this particular chapter in practical way, but today we consider a few points related to that of the structured query language, and from the next lecture we consider all the points with respect to the given practical session. Okay. Now, in this chapter we consider what is the structured query language. Till we discuss different points related to the database management system. In the first point, we discuss about the what is database management system and corresponding methodologies used in that DBMS. Corresponding structure of DBMS is also discussed. Okay. Now, second chapter we discuss one model, that is nothing but the entity relationship model, and in that model we can see that that is every data is stored in the corresponding database system, and how we can represent that model in the system, in a computer system, how we can create the databases. For that purpose we need to understand this particular point, that is the structured query language. Till we consider only the theoretical parts, only the theoretical points, those are required to study the structured query language. In this case, when we discuss the structured query language, we discuss this particular SQL structure. We need to consider the previous model, that is, we need to consider the previous chapter. The point is nothing but entity relationship model and its corresponding representation. How we can represent the entity, how we can represent the relation, what is the attributes, what are the types of attributes, and how we can represent the relationship, which type of relationship is required. Okay, all these points are required in this particular language. If you are understood better the entity relationship model and corresponding relationship of that model, then it is very easy to understand the structured query language. Okay, now we see one by one what is the structured query language. In this case here, SQL can stands for that structured query language. It is used for storing and managing the data in relational database management system, that is we consider the RDBMS. Okay, here when we represent the relational database management system, we discussed the last point in the previous chapter, that is what is the relational database management system. We also consider the corresponding structure of that RDBMS. In this case, what happened, that is relation means what, table, and we need to manage the table, and for that purpose we need to consider different types of key constraint, different types of constraint regarding to that of the table, constraint regarding to that of the columns, and what are the tuples and corresponding values stored in that particular tuples, what is the entity and what is the attribute of that corresponding entity. All these things we are considered in that relational database management system. And here when we use the structured query language, using this structured query language, we store the data with the help of that relational database management system, that is to manage the data of relational database management system. Now it is a standard language. SQL, it is one of the standard language for the relational database system. Okay, now where it enables the user to create, to read the data, to update the data, delete the data from the relational database and from the table. Now, why I can call here a relational database management system? Because of here, if we consider the entity, we create the table corresponding to that of the entity to store the information of such a types of entities. Okay, then that table is nothing but the relation. Okay, that table of that particular entity is nothing but the relation, and we maintain more than one type of relations, more than one type of a table into the given database system. That's why we can call that it as a relational database management. And on that relational database management system, we can perform that is to create the table, to create the relation, to create the that particular database system, and to read the data from that table. Okay, we consider we store the data into that table after creating it. We read the data, that is we access the data from the given relations from the given table. Then if you want to change something from that table, then we can do easily. We can delete the relation, or we can delete that particular data from the relational database management system. For all these tasks, we require a specific commands to that database system. And why or how we provide that command to that database system? Now, for that purpose, we require the structured query language. Okay. Now, in this case, all RDBMS like MySQL, Informix, Oracle, MX Access, and SQL Server use the SQL as their standard database language. That is, only the database system is available. Then it is not possible to store the data in that only database system and to access the data in that from the database system. It is not possible. That is, it is a just system. But if you manage that particular system, if you want to perform some operations on that system, we need a specific language. That language is nothing but the structured query language. Why we call it as a structured query language? Because here we can pass the particular information. We pass our query to that database. Query in the sense that is our problem or question. We consider that question in the form of query. Okay, and using that particular questionnaire, using that particular query, we can access the data from the database. Now here I will give you one example. If we have a particular development tool, and in that development tool we can develop the particular language. Okay, we can develop a particular program, but in which language we want to develop that program? If we consider our C language, okay, C language, it is familiar to all of you. That's why I will consider that example. In this case, what happened, that is, we have the compiler, we have the language processor, but there is no language to perform the processing in it. If you have a problem to perform or to interpret that problem in the form of computer language, okay, to solve that problem with the help of computer language, but computer program, but in which language that program can be write, or how we write that particular program in that particular processor? If there is no language, then there is no purpose of that particular processor. That's why here same thing can happen in case of the relational database management system. Just like it consists of MySQL, it is one of the relational database management system. Informix is there, Oracle is there, MX Access is there, the SQL Server is also there. Now all these are nothing but only the database management systems. They are not a language. They are only a management system. And to handle these management systems, to handle the data within that management system, we require a particular language, and that language is nothing but our SQL language, that is a structured query language. Why we call it as a structured query language? Because we can specify our question, we can specify our query in a particular structure format. Okay, it's just like our English words, English like statements, but with the help of particular commands used in that language, we can consider that language as a structured query language. Now it allows the user to query the database in a number of ways. Now using the English like statements, for that purpose we consider that SQL. Okay, in this case we have to follow, or that particular language can follow some characteristics. What are the characteristics? There are listed here. First of all is SQL is easy to learn. Okay, it's very simple language. I will give you one example practically also, and in next point also you will understand how this language is very easy. Okay, that is, it is easy to learn. Then second thing is nothing but SQL is used to access the data from relational database management system. Okay, all these database management systems are considered in this particular point. All they are use this SQL language to access the information stored in this particular databases. Now here SQL can execute query against the database. On this particular database, we execute that query with the help of SQL. SQL is used to describe the data, that is, description should be considered. Then SQL is used to define the data in the database and manipulate it when needed. Okay, data can be stored in that. Data can be defined with the help of SQL, and we can store the data according to the definition of that. And if you want to perform the manipulation like we can add, delete, or update that particular data. Such manipulations will take place with the help of SQL. Here, the SQL can use to create and drop the particular tables or databases from the database systems. Here, SQL is also used to create some views, some stored procedures and functions in the database. What are these particular points? We will discuss in details in the next point. Okay. Then it allows the user to set the permission on the tables, procedures, and views. Now we discuss three types of level of abstraction. In that level of abstraction, we also consider the top, that is, we consider the external level, we call it as a view level also. Now it's completely related to that of the end user of the database. Now here at that time I will tell you that what is that ex external level. Okay, what is this particular user level? In that case, only those information is provided to the end users. I will give you one example about the accountants in the bank system, manager of the bank system, then loan officer of the bank system, then agriculture officer of the bank system. They all have their own information. How this is possible to allow only such type of information to them? Now it is the part of that SQL language. We can provide that access with the help of by the administrator of the database, and these access permissions can granted by applying some commands using this SQL language. Now database administrator can apply some commands using this SQL language, and such a permissions were allowed them on that particular database. Okay, we discuss all these things in details in this particular chapter. However, we need to consider some basic elements of the SQL. Every language has its basic. Okay, and in this SQL language, we have very limited basic elements to implement that particular language or to implement the statements about the SQL language. What are that basic elements? That is, first one is nothing but the clauses. Now, clauses which are constituent components of the statement and queries. Clauses are nothing but the constituent components of the statements and corresponding queries. Now, in this case, they are optional part in that particular SQL. Okay, when we write the query, clauses are optional in this particular context. Now, next thing is nothing but the expressions. Expressions here we can consider that is to produce either scalar value, okay, or we can consider the tables consisting of columns and rows of the data. Expressions where produce that particular type of a result either in the form of scalar value, that is a single scalar value, or in the form of table form. That is nothing but the expressions. Now next one is nothing but the predicate. Predicate says that which specify the condition that can be evaluated to the SQL. Three value logic, true, false, unknown, or boolean truth values, and are used to limit the effect of that statements and queries, or to change the program flow. In this case, what happened when we specify the predicate for the particular query? What happened according to the result of predicate? We can retrieve the result from the database. In short, predicates are nothing but the conditions on the given query. Suppose I want to retrieve the student record from roll number 1 to 10. Only I want these 10 records. Okay. Now, how this is possible? Now, I will provide the predicate. That is, I will provide the condition where roll number between 1 and 10. Okay, roll number between 1 and 10. Only those records where can access from the database with the help of this particular query. Okay, that is nothing but the predicate. In short, predicates are nothing but the conditions were specified on the SQL language on that particular query. Okay, next thing is nothing but the query which is retrieve the database on the specific criteria. Here we specify the criteria. What are the criteria? Suppose I want to require the information of student roll number, name, and percentage only. And in that table, student table contains very large data, very large number of information were stored, different types of information were stored, but I require only name of the student, that is roll number of the student, name of the student, and third one is nothing but percentage of the student. Now I will write the query, and here what is my criteria is, that is required only 3 columns, and according to the condition, what, that is I want only roll number 1 to 10 students. Okay, from 1 to 10 students, and these 3 columns will be retrieved from the database. That is nothing but the query. This is my question. How I can access the data from that is data to access the data from student table, data from the student table from roll number 1 to 10. That is the query, and we can consider that query as a most important element in the SQL language. And one more thing is nothing but the statement. Statement is nothing but control program flow, or we can say it is a transaction which may have perceived the effect of schemata and data, or may control the transaction, program flow, connections, sessions, or diagnostics, etc., etc. We consider all these things here. We consider the statement. That is, we write that statement in the SQL according to this particular representation. Okay, these are the some basic elements used in the SQL. These are the primary. It just we consider. Okay. In this case here, optional part are predicates are optional. If you don't want to consider represent the condition or predicate, then this part will be considered as a optional part. But here we require the expression. We require the particular clauses. We consider two types of clauses, and we consider the queries, the most important part of that SQL. Okay. Now this is the architecture of a SQL language. What is this architecture, or what shows this particular architecture? In this case, this physical database will be shown here. Physical database means for where your database will be stored, where your student table will be stored. Now this is nothing but the generally secondary memory where our database will be considered. Okay. In this case, SQL query written by the user or the programmer. Programmer can write the query. Suppose I will write the query, select a roll number, select the particular students of information consisting roll number, name, and percentage. Okay, and here the roll number from the given table, that is the student, and we specify the condition roll number between 1 to 10. Okay, this is my query, and I will write that query at this particular point. Then one more query processor is there, query language processor. Okay, every language has its corresponding processor. Now in the SQL language we have the query language processor. Now that query language processor use with the help of parser and query optimizer. Query parser in the sense to parse that particular query. Okay, our English statement, our query is written in the form of English like statements, and that query is parsed by the parser, that is to check the syntax, to check the errors of that particular query, and then optimize some of the statements from that query. Okay, optimization in the sense that is to reduce some code, we reduce some anomalies or redundancies from that particular query without changing the meaning of the query. Okay, that is nothing but the optimizer. That's why the DBMS engine can execute the particular task very easily. That's why this optimizer is used and a parser will be used. Okay, the combination of these two can help to the query language processor, and the query will be processed, and that processed query is given to that of the database engine. Okay, in this case, database engine with the help of file manager and plus transaction manager. Transaction manager means what? Here we pass the query, and instead of in accordance with the query we get the result. म्हणजे आपण क्वेरी दिली आणि त्याच्या बदल्यात आपल्याला डेटा पाहिजे, त्या पद्धतीची इन्फॉर्मेशन त्या ठिकाणी पाहिजे, ते ट्रान्झॅक्शन झालं. Now how this transaction is executed, now for that purpose transaction manager is required. Okay, and with the help of this transaction manager and file manager, that database engine access the database from physical database, आणि ऍक्सेस झालेला जो काय डेटाबेस असेल तो नंतर काय केला जातो, एंड युजरला त्या ठिकाणी शो केला जातो, त्या ठिकाणी रिप्रेझेंट केला जातो. दॅट इज द आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ अ SQL. Okay, now here we have some advantages, that is simplicity. The SQL language is more manage more problems easily in the SQL. That is, if we consider some complicated tasks, then it will be handled very easily with the help of this SQL. That's why it is a simple language. Then completeness, that is relationally complete. Relationally complete means what? We represent the database, at the same time we need to represent the corresponding relations of all the relations, all the tables. Okay, relationship काय केली जाते, सगळ्या टेबलची रिप्रेझेंट केली जाते. User can write very large class of queries on that particular relation. That is to perform the interconnection between the tables. That's why it is the relationally complete. Data independence, that is, there is no reference to explicit access paths such as the indexes or physical sequences with the help of this SQL. Okay, that's why it is a data independent. Data independent म्हणजे त्या ठिकाणी जेव्हा रिलेशन्स तयार होतील आणि एसक्यूएल थ्रू तुम्ही ज्या वेळेस त्या ठिकाणी डेटा ऍक्सेस करता, त्यावेळेस अशा प्रकारचे रिलेशनशिप किंवा रेफरन्सेस त्या ठिकाणी बाइंड केले जात नाहीत. We just consider the data from different tables also, but it completely independent data. Okay, then next one is nothing but easy of extinction. That is extinction in the sense that is to add some basic functionality with the help of library function into it. त्याच्यामध्ये तुम्हाला काय करता येतं, त्याचेच लायब्ररी फंक्शन्स यूज करून ऍडिशनल काही गोष्टी ऍड करून तुम्हाला ती एसक्यूएल लँग्वेज काय करता येते, एक्सटेंड करता येते, म्हणजे त्याचे स्ट्रक्चर तुम्हाला वाढवता येतं. And support for the high level languages. So with the help of high level languages, we can use SQL query language processor, or we can use SQL to access the database. बरेचसे ऍप्लिकेशन्स तुम्ही जे डेव्हलप करता त्यांना डेटाबेस असतो. मग हा जो डेटाबेस आहे, हा डेटाबेस हँडल करण्यासाठी, मॅनेज करण्यासाठी त्या ठिकाणी एसक्यूएल काय केलं जातं, त्या हाय लेवल लँग्वेज थ्रू यूज केलं जातं. ओके, इट सपोर्ट द हाय लेवल लँग्वेज प्रोसेसिंग to access or to manage the data with the high level language. Now next thing is nothing but the what is the basic structure of SQL and how that SQL language will be used. Okay, here SQL allows user to define the data and database and manipulate that particular data. We also discuss it. Now here SQL has several parts. What are the parts? Are data definition language. SQL language हे वेगवेगळे parts त्या ठिकाणी consider केले जातात. Data definition language, data manipulation language, both have their own tasks. Data definition in the sense it is related to that of the definition of the data only. Manipulation in the sense that is this language is related only the manipulation of data. This language does not define the data. Data already defined by the data definition language, where only we perform the manipulation of that data. That is store the data, retrieve the data, then update the data. Okay, all such operations will take place in case of a manipulation language. And what happen or where we consider the data definition language, we consider the create statement, we retrieve the statement, we delete the database. Such definitions were considered in that DDL. Now next thing is nothing but the view definition. The duplicate copy of a table were created with this view definition. Embedded SQLs, integrity, authorization, transaction controls, all these parts were considered in case of a SQL. The next thing is nothing but the statement which is used to retrieve the information is called as the query. मी आता सांगितलं की आपल्याला एखादा डेटा जर फेच करायचा असेल तर त्यासाठी आपल्याला क्वेरी राईट करावी लागते. मग ही जी क्वेरी आहे ही क्वेरी यूज करून आपण तो डेटाबेस काय करू शकतो, रिट्राईव्ह करू शकतो किंवा तिथे डेटा आपल्याला स्टोर करता येतो. Here query is a database command. Okay, it is one of the type of command. Query जे ही एक डेटाबेस कमांड आहे आणि त्या ठिकाणी ती डेटाबेस कमांडचा यूज जर आपण केला तर डेटा रिट्राईव्ह पण होतो किंवा त्या ठिकाणचे जे रेकॉर्ड्स असतील त्या रेकॉर्डचे करस्पॉन्डिंग जो डेटा इन्फॉर्मेशन आहे किंवा जे रेकॉर्ड्स आहे ते रिट्राईव्ह करता येते. Now in this basic structure we have three clauses. Okay, both all three clauses are very most important. According to these three clauses we can write the statement or a query of that particular database. Now what is that clauses? First one is nothing but the select clause. What tells that select clause? That is which corresponds to the projection operation in case of a relational algebra. This is projection is nothing but the relational algebra symbol. We use projection as a phi symbol. Okay, now it is the list of attributes that will appear in the resulting table. तुम्ही जो डेटा रिट्राईव्ह करता त्या रिट्राईव्ह होत असलेल्या डेटामध्ये कोणते कोणते टेबल तुम्हाला डेटाबेस मधनं शो करायचे. ऑल दॅट टेबल्स और ऑल दॅट such information can be given in the select clause. Then from clause, from in the sense that is from which table you want to fetch the data. ओके, आपल्याला कोणत्या टेबल मधनं डेटा फेच करायचा आहे तो टेबलचं नाव जे मेन्शन केलं जातं ते फ्रॉम क्लॉज मध्ये दिलं जातं. दॅट इज करस्पॉन्ड अँड इट इज ऑल्सो करस्पॉन्ड टू द कार्टेशियन प्रोडक्ट ऑपरेशन. It is the list of tables that will be joined in the resulting table. Final resulting table जो आहे त्या टेबल मध्ये डेटा येण्यासाठी त्याच्या अगोदर कुठल्या कुठल्या टेबलचं बाइंडिंग परफॉर्म झालं that should be considered under this from clause. Okay, then next last thing is nothing but the where clause. I will say what is the predicate. Okay, that predicate can be represented with the help of this where clause. In this case the selection operation, it can be applied with the help of or corresponding to that of the selection operation, and it is the expression that controls the which row appears in the resulting table. ह्या कंडिशन वरती where clause वरती त्या ठिकाणी फार मोठ्या गोष्टी त्या डेटाबेस सिस्टीम वरनं फेच होणारे डिपेंड्स असतात. तर कोणत्या कंडिशनच्या अंडर तुम्हाला तो डेटा फेच करायचा आहे दॅट शुड बी कन्सिडर अंडर दिस where clause, or we can say where clause is the predicate. Here we can see the structure, actual structure of the SQL operations with the Cartesian certain modifications and enhancement. Some typical SQL query has the form this select. We can say A1 to AN, then from R1 to RM, and where P can show the predicate. Here A represent the attributes. Okay, attribute म्हणजे काय आले, सिलेक्ट मध्ये तुम्ही इथे कॉलमचे नाव देणार, इथे फ्रॉम R1 टू RM पर्यंत तुम्ही इथे टेबलचे नाव देणार. इथे जे कॉलम मेन्शन केले ते कोणत्या टेबल मध्ये प्रेझेंट आहे, R1 R2. सपोज A1 प्रेझेंट आहे R1 मध्ये, A2 प्रेझेंट आहे R2 मध्ये, अप टू AN प्रेझेंट आहे RM मध्ये. ओके, अशा पद्धतीने हे ऍट्रिब्यूट्स आणि त्यांचे करस्पॉन्डिंग हे टेबल्स काय केले त्या ठिकाणी कन्सिडर केले आणि ह्या कंडिशन नुसार ह्या टेबल मधनं हे जे ऍट्रिब्यूट्सच्या व्हॅल्यू असतील ह्या ऍट्रिब्यूटच्या व्हॅल्यू काय केले जातील ते फेच केल्या जातील. Are you understand? Select means what? To select that information from the given table according to this particular predicates or according to this particular condition. Okay, here we write this particular query with the help of relational algebra. We consider this symbol as a predicate symbol. Predicate in the sense that is, we consider the corresponding of sorry, it does not consider as a predicate. This will represent the select operation. Okay, attributes were represented, and sigma here sigma can represent the predicate. Predicate means what? In under this sigma we can mention the Cartesian product, or we consider it is a condition. And here we retrieve the particular records according to these conditions from this particular table. That is nothing but the SQL language, the SQL syntax or structure of that particular query. Now, the result of the SQL query is relation. क्वेरी कडनं रिटर्न होणारा जो रिझल्ट आहे तो एक तर रिलेशनच्या फॉर्मॅटमध्ये असेल, म्हणजे टेबलच्या फॉर्मॅटमध्ये काय केलं जाईल, तुम्हाला रिप्रेझेंट केला जाईल. ओके, ऑल दीज थिंग्स रिलेटेड टू दॅट ऑफ द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ क्वेरी. You need to understand this particular 3 steps. What is the query? How we can write the query? In the select clause, we can directly mention the column name. In the where clause, we can mention the number of tables from which you want to access the data. किती टेबल म्हणून तुम्ही डेटा ऍक्सेस करता त्या टेबलचे नेम्स त्या ठिकाणी मेन्शन करता अपेक्षित आहे. Okay, all these things related to that of the structure of the query. Now this is the query processing steps. What are these steps of the query processing? Here we consider the query, SQL query given to the parser or translator. Query optimizer optimize the query, and here database catalog is used when we perform the optimizer. And at the last we can the engine can execute the query and data will be returned to the user. डेटाबेसला डेटा काय केला जाईल, तुमचा त्या ठिकाणी रिटर्न केला जाईल किंवा तो डेटाबेस त्या ठिकाणी स्टोअर केला जाईल. दॅट इज नथिंग बट द क्वेरी प्रोसेसिंग स्टेप्स वी हॅव टू फॉलो. Okay, that is all are related to that of the basic structure of the query. Now next thing or next point we discuss in next lecture, that is how to create the database and how to delete the database and how to retrieve the information from the database. Okay, that is nothing but the hands-on session we discuss in the tomorrow lecture. Now today we can stop this